Kia ora, welcome to the Open Lab podcast.
Open Lab, the podcast.
Where we will be opening up conversations about the transition between university life and the design industry.
We give emergent design thinkers experience on all things design and arm them with the tools to hit the ground running.
You're with Connor
And Michael.
and we're here to help you through this transition. Kia ora and welcome back to Open Lab, the podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Nathan, who has been our intern this year. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I just finished VCD this year and I was interning for a month at Open Lab. I've just handed in and just heading out of uni.
What's like a little bit of background like as you as a person?
I'm from Gisborne originally, so I'm a country boy. In my spare time I'm into photography and chess, designing apart from that. Yeah.
Chess.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I wasn't expecting that one.
I'm like a tournament player for
Wow.
chess, yeah.
No way.
Play for the Wellington Club.
That's
That's
so
like one of my
Are you a-
passions.
Are you a national hero yet?
No, not
One of
yet.
your big
Getting there.
things? Oh, yeah.
Nah, not really. But
I
yeah,
kind of
into
picture it as being like a whole lot of old men playing in parks. Is that just a American version of this?
Not many
or-
parks to play in, but it's mainly guys and older guys. A few young people, but
So obviously you've come out of fourth year and
Yeah.
everyone's finished on their way to entering industry. Before we get into that, what was your major project and how did that go, like the last year of your uni life?
So my major project was on creating an inclusive kit for classrooms to help dyslexic children have like a positive experience in the classroom rather than not focusing on learning experiences but just like empowering experiences. It was a big year, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was. I think it turned out pretty good.
And so what was the outcome with your project? Like, was it a physical thing? Was it a digital thing?
I explored a few different options, but it ended up being a board game, physical interaction,
Yeah.
and
And I remember seeing it. It was bloody cool. Like, I don't think you've given
Yes.
yourself enough. What's the word?
You're not talking yourself up.
If you could take yourself back to fourth year, you're working on your major project, exposure's coming up, what is the best thing and what is the hardest thing?
one thing I probably struggled with, I'd say, is how much you've kind of got to discipline yourself and lead your own project, which is hard coming out of the structure of the earlier years. And you're free to change your project totally over a day, which is like a scary thought. I mean, it's something you kind of got to keep an eye on, I suppose.
How did you deal with that?
I suppose it's talking to tutors and making sure you're heading in the right direction. It's not being afraid to kind of make changes, but not changing for the sake of it, or because something
Yeah.
seems like fun.
Yeah. I feel like that's
Yeah.
something like every student struggles with
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
through fourth year.
Yeah.
And also having the confidence to make those choices, be in charge of yourself, which is, like you said, super scary. No one wants to be like, okay, I'm doing this project for this reason, not have that approval from your lecturers.
You get so many inputs from so many different people, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was a really cool idea I never thought about, and oh, that fits in. Oh, how do I make this all happen in the project? But then you've got to sit back and go, actually, does that align with my strategy? Does that
Yeah.
align with the things that I want to represent and all that stuff? So it's a real tricky balance to kind of get that
Yeah.
right, eh? And
I think the way I work is quite a roller coaster because
Yeah.
I tried out, I did a lot of exploring and tried out different ways the brief could manifest. Instead of a board game, I tried things like puzzles and books and all sorts of things. Whereas for other people, I feel it seemed like some people just made a plan and followed it, which I was really envious of. It seemed a lot less stressful because before then I kind of wasn't sure what I was making. But
Yeah.
I think that's just the way I work, and I think it's all right if you know that.
That's so interesting because I was the exact same. But I feel like the people that did just make the plan and go down one route, it was also more stressful for them because they didn't know if that was the right thing because they hadn't tried everything else. Whereas you knew what you were doing was working and worked better than everything else you had tried, if that makes sense.
I suppose it's different strengths for different people. Like I would say be more comfortable exploring different options, whereas some people would be more comfortable following a strict plan for a project, whereas...
And because maybe your topic was quite a big topic, you probably had to go down a way where you had to use a lot of methodologies to come up with a solution that best suited certain things. What was your process going through working out how this turned into a board game at the end of it?
I think a lot of my time was spent just getting used to what I'm designing for. So I was talking to the correct audiences like teachers and interviewing people with dyslexia and stuff like that. And it just settling in, feel like I made a lot of obvious mistakes earlier on, but it's because I hadn't really, it's a totally new project and I hadn't really taken on inclusive design before. It's just figuring things out as you go and making the mistakes earlier rather than later, I think was quite a good thing.
And I think that all comes into the exploring.
Yeah.
People see failing and making mistakes as such a bad thing. But when you are working on such a big project, that is crucial to getting to the end outcome. Like, you have to fail to know that, you know, like the puzzle wasn't going to work. You touched on inclusive design. Was that something new to you, or did you get taught it through uni, or?
I suppose I was aware of inclusive design and some of the ideas, but I'd never really done a project while really considering it, especially not a project specifically about inclusive design either, because I feel like it doesn't have to be about inclusive design, but you can incorporate inclusive things through it just to make sure it's a good resolution. Making it specifically about inclusive design was quite tough, being just getting used to the whole idea of inclusive design. It's just quite a lot. It took me just a lot of time exploring.
As a designer, you learn to let go of those attachments of things looking a certain way when it comes to inclusive design. You know, when it comes to contrasting colours on websites or text size, because obviously when you're trying to make something beautiful, you know, everything's like small and little and bright colours, and then you're like, actually that colour's not going to work, that text is too small. But like learning that it's okay to let go of those things and being like, well, it's for the greater good. It's so someone else can actually read it. Like, you would rather want them to read it than for it to just look good.
Do you feel going through that whole process of learning about inclusive design has now empowered you as a designer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's because it was something I hadn't really focused on. It's been like a huge turning point, especially earlier on. I was very focused on how things kind of looked rather than the ideas and the content, but it was kind of a big switching point for me where I could let the idea lead the outcome a lot more. I think it was a nice switch. It's a good thing to take forward as well. Just all the little things around text size and colours and all sorts of things like that. It's hard to kind of forget the little things you learn like that.
I think that's like a real powerful learning, because I think through uni we do get taught the more aesthetic side first, and we always know that with design you have function as well. But I think universities almost traditionally are based on what something looks like, trying to make it good, and then as you go through the years and you leave, you start realising it's so much more about how it works and how it functions, and then how that influences what it actually looks like, which I think is going to be super handy for you when you do leave uni and go into a job, because in the real world what it looks like isn't that crucial, because it is aesthetic. Like, how something works and functions and helps people is so much more important than what it looks like. And especially because I think we are so harsh and critical, like, as designers about what something looks like, that we're always straight to judge something mainly on our like personal preference, but then at the end of the day that's just an opinion rather than like an actual right or wrong.
In uni, it's especially with kind of being in a big group of designers, the first thing you judge people's work on or get critiqued on is what people see, and it takes a lot more time to get to know a project behind what something looks like. There is a lot of tension with trying to get people to understand the project before they critique it, and that's why it can be hard having a project which is kind of led by the function rather than the aesthetics, which it's a hard thing to adjust to, I suppose, especially if you're prone to people's feedback about how things look.
You know, when you're at uni and you're in a group setting and you're showing your project and you have that time to explain it, it's like something changes and you fully understand it and you're like, oh, that's why it's pink, and like now you're not judging it for being pink, if that makes sense. Whereas, I guess in the real world you don't have that chance to sit down and explain your project to people, so they have to get it straight away.
Your project, Nathan, did both of those things. It looks aesthetically awesome, but it's also a very functional, fun game. You've also told me that you went for a whole lot of prototyping and went into schools and got some dyslexic kids to play the game, and maybe I'll hand it back over to you and you can explain what had happened.
Yeah, so I got to go to a school, and I didn't get to run the test myself. I passed it on to a teacher to run it, because I wasn't allowed to be there when the kids were testing it and kind of record it or anything. Ethical reasons. But kind of discussed a few ways we could run it. The teacher ran one test first with just dyslexic kids, and one with 2 dyslexic kids with just other kids as well. That was a big part of my project, was creating classroom experiences for the whole class where specific people with dyslexia can feel empowered, not just in a group of dyslexic kids making empowering experiences, but yeah, so everyone could do it. Yeah, normalising it, and everyone could do it kind of together. Yeah, there was a nice moment. One of the shyer children got to, he actually taught the other kids the rules after he'd played it the first time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that was really, really
So
sweet that he felt comfortable enough. And especially making a game which is kind of strong enough and simple enough that can be explained. It's not too technical, but everyone could kind of enjoy it as well. Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful thing about your project, is that you weren't just still sectioning off dyslexic kids and making them feel dyslexic. You were equalising the environment in order to bring them back up. I think that's so cool. With fourth year, obviously a big part of it is research and prototyping, which is something that I think a lot of students miss because it's scary. Like, they don't want to go out to schools, they don't want to approach, you know, like, how do you approach a child, you know what I mean? So how did you go about that whole process? Because obviously prototyping was really crucial for your project. Was that something you were, like, scared to do or hesitant to do, or you just jumped straight in?
It was really hard getting really effective research and prototyping, especially with such a young audience with ethics. It was difficult, but it's kind of, people are really keen to help, especially if you've got your best intentions at heart with your project. People can kind of see that. It's just, I think, doing it earlier rather than later and having the time to set things up is kind of nice, because people do want to help and like the idea of these projects.
So how did you approach the school?
I actually did a post on a Facebook group, I think it might have been Dyslexia New Zealand, something like that. And then a teacher reached out to me and said I'd be keen to run a test. So
that's
yeah,
so cool.
Yeah.
And it was a local school, obviously, as well?
Yeah, it was just it was Wainuiomata.
Oh,
Nice.
so cool.
Yeah. Other teachers reached out too, but it was figuring out where.
Yeah.
And timing and making sure everything could line up, because there was a lot of moving pieces trying to get...
Were you expecting a response from someone, or did you think it would kind of just fall flat on its face?
No, I didn't reach out for anything too specific. I kind of just said that I would love to, like, have people's feedback just generally.
Yeah.
And it was a nice surprise.
So it was quite open and...
Yeah, because I didn't really want to steer it anyway in particular.
Cool, and then that teacher must have really took it on board and kind of rolled with it, which also helped shape it, I guess, a little bit in a random, unexpected way.
It did, yeah. Especially a big part of it was not just creating the game, but making sure teachers knew how to use the game in the right way, because it's quite a flexible kit, because you can't really make one experience that suits every school. So it's preparing teachers in the best way, which was a lot of where the good feedback came in. Yeah, having a teacher's feedback after playing it was, huge.
Yeah.
And kind of shaping that.
And when you took it out to the schools, was it where it was now? Like, was it kind of finished?
So a lot of the physical components were finished, but I would have liked to have done it earlier, but there just wasn't really enough time, because there was so much time to make.
Yeah.
It took me like 2 weeks to get everything printed and lay everything, and
that's crazy.
So I would have liked to have done it at more of a prototyping stage, but there's a bit of a time crunch.
Yeah.
And I think there would be things I'd slightly change with the physical components, but it's kind of just had to be realistic.
There's always something to change.
Yeah.
In hindsight, just talking about that timeline and timeframes, how would you now give guidance for people that are going into their fourth year?
I don't know, everyone works at their own pace, so it's kind of hard to mark certain checkpoints, but as long as you go full steam ahead early on and cover the foundations as quick as possible, I think that really helped me, rather than trying to make up for it later on. I mean, I feel like everything came together in the final 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And before that, it's basically just foundations
And
of
kind of
exploring
working out
and
everything.
yeah.
That is like a common trait, and like with all the students that come through, and even probably happened when we were at uni too, is just like you said, just getting all the messy stuff out there, like, and have fun, like explore, try different things, and then when it gets to those last 4 weeks, that's when you need to start deciding and putting things into action. You know, making the game, like recording the video, and if you're not doing it then you gotta
or allowing 2 weeks to do all your printing, and you know, because things go wrong. And did anything go wrong in printing?
Or in general with your project at the end?
Not really.
Wrong's a bad word, but you know,
that last 2 weeks where people start to freak out, kind of get things done, I do that at like 4 weeks, which is, I like freak out too early and then get a lot of things done, and then I run out of motivation in the last week.
Right, yeah.
So I do it. It's quite a good way of doing it. I do have that extra time because I got onto printing quite early. I knew big picture would be flat stick, with especially a lot of projects were doing all sorts of random things that took a lot of time. So yeah, getting on to them, I wanted to do that earlier.
Funny, all as I can see is you've been a catalyst of going, and then like
Everyone
2 weeks down.
Yeah.
Because I did a book in my 4th year, and so did like most of the people that I was surrounding myself with. And I remember like last week we're all going to the printers together, all getting like these 100-page books printed, and it was just like chaotic. And it was kind of like whoever's first in line. So don't do that, kids.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror stories with especially when you hear back from the printer saying, "Oh, it's going to take a few extra days," and that's when people start freaking out a little bit.
And then you don't have a few extra days.
Yeah, the more room you leave for error, the better, I think.
Definitely.
Nice. So the printing's all done and your project's all sorted. You go in and you're having to present in front of everyone.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
So it was in front of the panel of 3, so we had 2 tutors and an industry industry person. It was weird. It was I think that was one of the points I struggled with a bit as well, because I like just making it, and I kind of want the project to speak for itself, but it's not like that at all. Yeah, I think I really struggle with that bit, because I really struggle trying to explain, lay the context first. I kind of dive straight into it and explain all the details before I lay out the context for what I'm saying. I planned my presentation quite a lot and practiced it a few times, but I think if I did that even a bit earlier for that, and running it by tutors would have been nicer. And I think I should have got outside my friend group a bit more and tried it with random people.
Yeah.
Because I remember at the end of my presentation, I got a few questions I probably shouldn't have got. Ones are like, I should have covered that. That's a whoops. That's a big mistake that bit wasn't explained before, kind of covering details.
Because that last 2 weeks is such a rush. Everything's all up in your head, and then all of a sudden you've got to then present it, but you haven't had the time to fully step away, reflect, and then go, this was what it was all about. It's probably right now that you could have understand your project be 10 times better than what you did when you presented it. It's such a weird
It's just like
thing.
that quote, like asking a fish what's water, and they're like, what? Because you've all year been in this project. Like it's your everyday, you probably like thought about it all the time. And so did probably your friend group, because you're always together. You said getting that outside advice, and then they can see it from that different perspective, stood back. And I think that's where a lot of people find it hard, because they're trying to describe something that is their everyday, and they already know, and it's like you forget, that whole tell me like I'm an alien, and it's just like, well, you're not an alien, so like why? But I think it's pretty common to get a question at the end. That happened to me too, and I was like, oh my god, that's so simple, why did I not say that?
I couldn't agree more. That was the main part I struggled with. It is having that big picture idea of what your project is, and I was getting very caught in the details.
Yeah.
And then it was a big question of, so what would you actually call this? Is it a game kit or a tool kit and things like that? Getting the question, is it a game or what is it? Something I needed to have very clear before I laid everything out.
It's interesting. Yeah. Even like, because when we said like, oh, what was your project? Does it have a name?
I like how you think. It's a game kit. It had a lot of game pieces, but you could play different games with it, and the teachers could kind of use it to create the right experience for their class. It's taken a lot of time to kind of realize that as well. I spent a lot of time trying to make specific games kind of work, and so it was a game kit, but then it could also be used as tools. It was kind of trying to figure out what it actually is.
Well, I guess it's like that perspective, like to the children it's a game, but to the teacher it's a tool to enable, like, to empower those children.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all packaged together as a kit.
Woo!
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
A+.
And even talking to some of the teachers, they kind of recognise it as tools to help teaching as well. They could see potential in using it for lessons and stuff like that as well. Well, it was like I got that feedback towards the end of the project, so it's hard to
chuck that in somehow.
chuck that in. I didn't want to complicate things too much.
Because it wasn't really tested
or
something.
Yeah. So it is quite a hard question, like when they ask what is the project, and you're so caught in the details that it's just like, well, that's a good question.
You tell me.
Yeah.
So when it was all done, you left the room, it was all finished, and then you were kind of moving on. Did you feel like you'd done good? Do you feel like you'd accomplished what you'd set out for that year? Because I know a lot of students like either walk away feeling super deflated, or they're like, yeah, I just aced that presentation. What was the feelings you were going through at that stage?
It definitely took a few days to kind of figure out how I felt about the project in general. And I think exposure is a nice time to kind of look back on everything. Once you've finished your presentation, you can take a breath and kind of look at things with fresh eyes, which is it's really annoying that happens. It's like I wish I could see this clearly while I was at the end of the project.
And for the listeners out there, Exposure is a week-long exhibition of all student work here in Kokomasi and all the fourth years that have finished fourth year, and it's open to the public, and industry can also come along to look through all the student work.
Future fourth years listening, you get one night where it's opening night and your family get to come and you kind of get to celebrate and show your parents what you've been doing, because they probably just think that you draw pictures. And then there's one other night which is specific for industry, so Massey or yourself could invite people from anywhere in industry to come and look at your project and maybe talk about future relationships or connections, which is super cool. So how did you find industry night? Did you invite anyone to come look at your project, or you kind of just YOLO'd it?
I didn't invite anyone. I find that really weird. I find that a lot. It's a weird amount of pressure on a
I couldn't agree more.
specific night. People go and look at your project and you want to give them time to understand your project or read it or have a proper look at it. You also want to kind of like make contact with them, but you don't want it to be weird. It's a weird space where you're just kind of standing back looking at someone looking at your project, like, do I go talk to them? What do I do? And whispering with all your friends. And you don't want it to seem weird. It's a really odd environment. And sometimes you feel like it's better just to let people look at it, and if they grab a business card if they want, so there's always like contact details there.
Yeah. Because I did the same thing and someone was looking at mine. I was like, okay, it's time to like walk up to them. As I walk up, they walked away. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah.
I don't think that feeling has ever changed from that space, because like even me going through that 14 years ago, it was still the same thing, like just that weird space or that weird interaction, or I don't know.
I feel like out of, the 100 students that there is or so, there's probably like a handful that are so specific. They know exactly where they want to go, so maybe they'll contact someone, or their project is so angled at a specific issue that they invite someone to come have a look. Most of us, I like just winging it, like trying to just get through, like we don't know where we're going after, you don't know what you want to do, and so I remember just like having fun that night. How did industry night end up for you?
It went well. Felt like sometimes it was kind of hard to judge. It depends who the person is looking at your project, where sometimes you go and talk to someone and it feels like you're just interrupting them looking at something at your project and they kind of want to look into it. And other times it looks like they're there to meet students. It's kind of hard to
So did you talk to some people?
Yeah, I talked to probably 3 or 4 people. There were quite a lot of people there, really,
I guess
with varying success.
I guess the real funny thing is, like, these people have been invited and come to the space knowing that it's a student exhibition, knowing that they can see and talk to students. So why are students so afraid to just put themselves out there and make that kind of contact as well? Like,
it's just so scary for
yeah,
some reason.
I mean, it is scary,
Don't
but
know
like,
why.
yeah, why is there that weird kind of
Pressure.
or something going on?
I think it's like that N-word, the networking.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a scary... How do you even make contact with people rather...
And you know
you
that
just wanna
they're
talk.
secretly like judging your project as well. It might be
Yeah.
a good judging or it might be a bad judging, but they're still at the end of the day, which is still like I feel like at exposure it's still soft spot. Like you've still spent all year on this project, and then for someone to come and have a look at it, you don't want them to, rock the boat or like make you regret anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. And like, no one really teaches you how to network, do they? They say it's the
Yeah.
most important thing to do.
I did have a workshop the morning before. Yeah, it was really chill and just trying to explain that this don't make it too forced, or it's just kind of just getting to know people. But I think it is quite a tough space because you've just spent a whole year on this project, and it's not only you don't want people to kind of tear it apart, but you want people to understand it as well, and you want people to appreciate
It's
what
like
you've
your
done if
baby.
it's an employer. So it's getting a balance between talking about it and kind of explaining it without just bombarding people with
Vomiting
information
on them.
about your whole year and going and like verbally attacking them with everything.
It's like you said, it's a weird power dynamic because you're still seeing yourself as a student and them as a person from industry rather than you're entering industry. So you'll soon be equals, but you're still looking at that weird power thing. Going back to networking, like you are actually quite good at it because we talked to you at Creative Mornings once. That was
Yeah.
about our podcast, which is weird now that you're on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
That's
that
right.
was obviously before you're an intern.
And I think we...
And we had we interviewed?
No, we were talking... We must
Had we
have
interviewed
talked...
you before then?
Maybe?
I knew you, so it must have been from
Yeah,
either
must
an
have.
interview or...
We must have done an interview to start off with in the beginning part of the year for the internship.
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't get that first
Yeah.
half of the year, and then we
Yeah.
said... We must have met you there, and that's when
Yeah.
we said, reapply, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, that was
Don't be
it.
afraid that like you
Yeah.
didn't get it the first time around. You could probably get it the second time, and then you got it the second time.
Yeah.
And
that-
like that might have been like scary or weird, but like we literally just stood there and you just said hello and it was great. And then you and then from that, like we remembered you and we're like, oh yeah, Nathan, he's cool. He's at Creative Mornings. Like give him the job.
Cheers. Thanks for that one.
Literally how it happened.
Yeah, because I think students put lots of pressure on themselves, like, oh, I'm not great at type or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, in industry, people just want to work with cool people.
Yeah.
People just want to work with nice people that are keen and, like, just ready to, like, do stuff. So that's always my piece of advice, is just, like, just be yourself.
Yeah.
Say hello.
Yeah.
And I guess also with Creative Mornings, you ended up putting yourself out there as well, when because you do a little bit of a side hustle with photography. And tell me a little bit about how you got connected with Creative Mornings.
So my friend is on the team at Creative Morning, so I just do the event photography for them. So that's once a month. There's like a lecture series. Once a month there's a creative talk of some sort and breakfast, and I just kind of go along and photograph everyone having fun, photograph the talk. And it's a nice team there as well. It's nice to like gets you out of bed early in the morning, which is good. And it's just kind of talking to people, and
that's what networking's all about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just talking to people.
It is weird adjusting to the whole idea of networking, because I think everyone starts off thinking that there's these people out there that they're kind of concealing a job.
Yeah.
There's that idea networking's about getting a job, which it kind of is, but it doesn't have to be about that. It should just be a chat.
Well, it's connections,
first.
it's
Yeah.
people, it's being human about
Yeah.
things, and over time, relationships grow and expand, and then essentially universe will align, and you potentially will get that job or have some kind of connection with knowing someone who knows someone who knows someone who has a job available.
And it should be just getting to know people and making those connections rather than seeing if this person has an opportunity for me right now.
Yeah.
Which I do-
Definitely coming from that human side and just asking how someone is rather than, so job's going? No.
Which, I mean, it's just because it's so stressful leaving uni and not having anything.
Yeah, how has that
locked in.
experience been for you?
I went through Summer of Tech to start off with to try and get a summer internship, which I didn't end up getting, which was a shame, but I'm really glad I did it because it was a good experience for like networking and also interviewing, and it was nice to get everything like my portfolio kind of sorted earlier in the year, my CV sorted, even though it's kind of an iteration of it. I kept updating it and kept making it better, but it was nice to have that out the way early and then start going for jobs earlier on. And even though some things don't turn out right, it's just not the right opportunity. It gets you in the swing of things earlier on rather than...
Yeah, and you're tipping your toes in the water and testing certain things and understanding how you process that whole interview thing. And I guess over time you get better, you change your tactics, you continue to grow and expand your knowledge within that space, and over time you hopefully will land a job. Yeah, it's just that whole tiptoeing into that space.
Yeah, because they always say just like apply for jobs you don't even want, like just you know, put yourself out there, because like we were saying before, it gets your name out there, and then each time, you know, you put your CV through, you might like change a word or like update it, or you get more confident with your like email or your cover letter, and you start feeling way more like chill. And then that allows you to be more yourself. So when you do go in for an interview or you meet someone, you're like, oh yeah, I've done this like 10 times already.
Yeah.
And then you know, you get your dream job, which is great. You obviously applied for a few jobs.
Yeah, so I applied for a few through Summer of Tech and I got a few interviews. So that was a good experience, just getting a few interviews under the belt, but nothing turned out from the Summer of Tech. During kind of exposure and after that was just applying for normal jobs for either the summer or next year, and it's pretty slim pickings as far as graduate roles and entry level roles, because there's always tons of roles for seniors and intermediate designers. I've been applying for a lot of things, and then you just hear back, sorry, looking for someone with more experience, and it's like, oh yeah, which is, I think that's the way it goes. It's kind of good to have a go anyway.
So where were you finding those jobs?
I've mainly been doing Trade Me and LinkedIn. You get a lot through there. It's pretty simple, but also through some job websites like Seek and stuff, just in case something pops up there as well. But
and did you have an idea around the type of work that you wanted to go into? What was that thinking process like?
I think there's another like big shift for me this year as well, trying to figure that out. I think it's nice applying for jobs in that way as well, because it's a big year is doing your own project and kind of figuring out what you like doing and how you work. I'm a bit of a like generalist really, so it's hard to, I've not got like one core design passion. I'm like, I want to be an experienced designer or something like that. It has been hard trying to figure out what I want to do. I think the main thing was applying for different things and seeing how it felt being interviewed by them and what they had to offer, and I ended up doing a few like trials as well for certain companies, and there was one for like an in-house communications role, which was cool. It was a cool experience, and like I was like, oh yeah, I could kind of see myself doing that. It appealed. I did Design Day for it's Alfero, which was another good bit of experience, and you basically work in the firm for a day and group up, follow a brief. And it's kind of a chance for them to see how people work and pick interviews from there. And that was also a good experience for seeing if that was something I'd like to do. Like, it was very agency-based, so like quite fast-paced, and kind of seeing the quality of thinking and stuff like that. I also enjoyed that, but that didn't turn out, and I think it was probably almost for the best. It's kind of, after a bit of time, you realise if you don't get a job, it might not be the right job, because if you're the perfect fit for the role, they probably would have picked you, which is, it seems weird. A lot of times it just feels like you're getting neglected, but it takes time to kind of...
And it's really hard to understand that as well until you've had some time to reflect back on that situation and stuff. It's good advice.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, because a lot of students are just scrambling, like you're just trying to find a job because there's so much competition. But it's like you've actually got to spend some time being like, do I want to work for this like company? Like, do these people, are they my like fit? So after all the neglect, did you have any positive responses?
So I actually ended up getting an interview through Industry Night, which was cool.
At Exposure.
At Exposure.
Great.
So that was what we were talking about earlier. Someone contacted me afterwards, or someone I kind of chatted to a little bit, but he kind of just had a look, said a few comments, grabbed a business card and kept walking. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, no.
Interesting.
And it was like very, very low key. I was like, oh, don't know how that went. And got an email, and then ended up going in for an interview. That was at a place called Diagram. Yeah, so the interview, it went really well, and I think everyone was on board with they asked me to talk through my major project.
Yep.
So it was kind of just talk through, just showed some slides and explained certain things and just the main thinking behind it, because
Yep.
it's mainly a strategy company. Yeah, it felt really gelled really well. They were really interested in the project and the thinking, so it kind of made the talk a lot easier, I think,
Nice.
as well, which
Yeah.
is,
That's exactly
Yeah.
what you want.
and it was nice having had a lot of interviews before that I'd obviously hadn't gone as well, or
Yeah.
not badly, but it's
Didn't feel right.
I felt more relaxed in this one.
Yeah.
I think, which was nice because I can stress a bit about
And
interviews.
Amazing.
And we did an awesome little interview portfolio coaching
Yes,
session
yeah, we
beforehand
did.
as well.
Yeah, my main concern, even I said with the presentation, is kind of talking to work and explaining ideas. Yeah, it's not just getting people to look at your portfolio and go, great, we want it. It's kind of, you've got to be able to
Yeah.
explain your thinking, which is a huge part of working as well, I suppose.
Definitely.
Getting that perspective on how to talk to work, how someone would, as an employer, would want to hear about a project,
Yeah.
what they're interested in.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that goes back to what we were talking about. In industry, people care more about how it works and how you figured it out and the strategy behind it, rather than, oh, this looks great, but what does it do?
Yeah.
Are you excited to work for a Diagram who focuses on more strategy?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's going to be a cool learning experience for sure. And I'm quite glad it's mainly a strategy role, even though I've spent a lot of time doing more graphic design based stuff. Especially after a major project, I've kind of figured out I find it a lot more rewarding
Yeah.
doing strategy. That's what I want to do, even though it's hard to say that because
Yeah.
I enjoy doing a lot of things. It's going to be a step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm really
amazing.
excited to start working there. It's going to be fun. Yeah.
Congrats, it's so exciting.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so
very
awesome.
exciting. Yeah.
We always like to see people that
Yes.
have touched Open Lab and then
Yeah.
go out into the big wide world and
Yeah.
get their
Yeah.
first job. And this
Yeah.
one seems not a typical design VCD role,
Yeah.
which is really cool as well, that you've actually jumped into a strategy role. Yeah, and your major project totally reflected how much time and energy you've put into that craft of thinking, prototyping and testing and all that kind of stuff. So I think what you learnt in your final year has really set you up for this role.
Yeah.
And I think what you were talking about before, when you're in Alfero doing that work day, it seemed cool, but it didn't
Yeah.
quite gel, and then you didn't get it.
Yeah.
This is totally, I feel, an awesome
Yeah.
path to kind of head down.
Meant to be.
And it's meant to be.
Yeah, I think I kind of realised that during the interview almost, because when you talk through a project, it's kind of when the questions seem to reflect how you thought on it as well.
Yeah.
Because if I put most of my thinking into the strategy and then they were asking the right questions, which allowed me to kind of explain it in the best way.
They felt
So-
like your team. In
Yeah.
a way,
Yeah,
you guys
yeah.
gelled across the table. And
Yeah, which is really nice. Where I think businesses could kind of reflect what their priorities are with how they ask you about projects, which everyone works differently and has different priorities in a project.
Yeah.
And can focus more on certain aspects. And if you both are interested in the same elements and just had a good conversation. about it,
That's
it's
a really
Yeah.
good kind of takeaway,
Yeah.
I think, as well. Hey, just to
Yeah.
kind of subtly think about those things.
Yeah.
When you're feeling those vibes across the table in those interviews, it feels like you guys are part of that same team thing.
Yeah.
And when there's a little bit of things not gelling properly, that potentially that's maybe
Yeah.
a little sign. And
Do you-
so when do you start?
halfway through Jan. So
Cool.
that's 13th Jan.
So now you can forget about life and
Yeah.
go and party
Yeah.
this
Relax.
summer.
yeah.
Play
Come
some chess.
in the park.
With some old men. Yeah.
Some old man. Lovely. All right, should we leave the podcast as that?
What is a piece of advice that you would give baby Nathan going through uni?
Don't stress so much because everything turns out all right in the end. But I think the kind of stress is what kind of pushes you to work through things and make things better. So I don't know if that's good advice, but I mean, it'd be nice to hear it anyway, even though I'd still
Yeah.
stress afterwards.
I'm sure
It's
baby Nathan
definitely-
would love that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because it's not the end of the world, even though we make it out to be in
Yeah.
fourth year. You put so much pressure on yourself, but
Yeah.
it's just chill out and have fun
Yeah.
and enjoy your last year at university.
Yeah, probably to kind of enjoy it as well, as because it's the last part of the education system or working with at other students, and it's like moving into a different space. I mean, you still be learning, but yeah, you kind of look back on the time nicely. I think it's, even now, it's just like, oh, it was really, really nice doing the degree, and like the people you meet and stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah,
you appreciate it more, eh?
Yeah, and it's hard to look at it nicely during the last like 2 weeks where you've had like no sleep and you're like super stressed about presentations. You're trying to look at it nicely, but it's stressful. Yeah. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
That's all right.
And sharing your experience. We've loved having you.
Thanks for tuning in, and if you want to see any more from us, you can head over to our Instagram, which is OpenLabNZ, or head to our website, and all the details are in the show notes. Can't wait to talk to you soon.
Bye!
Ka kite!